random guys, welcome back to the Kundalini Yogini. This is Prasida. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am actually going to be leading a class as a guest speaker on Hinduism and the afterlife. Basically, the views of Sanatana Dharma on death, afterlife, reincarnation, and this field of cosmology, life and death. And I cannot be more excited to talk about this topic. It is so close to my heart, one of my most absolute favorite topics to discuss, to think about, to meditate on. And I'm going to be recording the lecture for you guys. So if any of you guys are interested in this topic, I'm going to be doing about an hour-long discourse walking through first, what is life as per Hinduism? Who are we? What is the soul? What is the consciousness? What happens when we die? The cycle of reincarnation and the concept of past lives, going into karma and how that plays a role in this topic, and then why it's so important for yogis to face death before dying and why that's such an essential part of the spiritual path in Hinduism, as well as ending with a guided meditation on death and on awareness. So it's going to be a really exciting lecture, and then I'm going to be closing with a live Q&A, so definitely tune in for that. I'm sure we're going to get some really cool questions. I hope that you guys enjoy, and I will see you on the next video.
Welcome.
Yay, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I think it's so cool that you guys have this class available. I would have just killed to have a class like this at USC. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys today about this topic, and I think it's one of the most fascinating things to think about, to discuss, to meditate on, and extremely fundamental to actually our own happiness, our own fulfillment in this lifetime, And yeah, it's so vital to our lives actually, to be thinking about, discussing about, and understanding death and embracing it, which is a huge part of Hindu belief and culture. So I'll talk to you guys about that more throughout this presentation. There's like hundreds of spiritual paths within Hinduism. So I'm kind of going to be sharing from the perspective of yoga and tantra philosophies, which is also sometimes called as Shaivism or Kashmir Shaivism. So I'm going to be talking kind of from that lens, just so you guys know, because there's actually such diversity within the umbrella that is Hinduism, including Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. All of it falls under that umbrella. So it's a massive, massive, spider web of paths, and we'll get into that a little bit. So I'm going to screen share here if I can figure it out. So just to start off, although we are talking about focusing on death and the afterlife, it's really essential to actually touch on what life is according to Hindu philosophy, because that directly relates to what we know as death. So I don't have enough time to get into this because it's a very complex map, but if you guys are interested, you can look up this concept as well after class. The basic foundation is that the original Big Bang Theory actually was talked about in the Vedas, which are the Hindu scriptures, some of the massive Hindu scriptures and some of the oldest known texts in the entire world, which are part of this path. And they actually talk about, interestingly, the Big Bang in different terminology, but describe almost identically what we now understand as the creation of the universe. And in different words, the theory is actually called Brahman Vishvotak, and it shares about this idea that there was this massive accumulation of energy and heat, which then hit and exploded outwards to create the known universe as consciousness becoming matter. So it's a very scientific approach, and really cool to see that within the spiritual path, it's very much based in science that we know today, which is just cool from an intellectual perspective. And who are we in this equation? Who as human beings, right? As individuals. This is one of the most important concepts to understand. So what we understand in Sanatana Dharma, in Hinduism, is that there is this field of consciousness, very similar also to what quantum physics now says, the concept of the unified field. What this is called as in Sanskrit is Brahman, which is this consciousness which expands and pervades everything. You can think of it as a collective consciousness or an independent intelligence which is running the entire universe, which is everything, right? It's within us, it's within the rocks, it's within the trees, in the animals, in the planets, in space, in the stars, in the sun. Everything is a part of that field, okay? And that is like the whole. But the understanding in Hinduism is that that whole, although it's this massive, hard to wrap our minds around concept, is actually exactly what we are. We are a part of that exact same consciousness in an individualized body. So me talking to you right now, or your professor, or you listening right now, although we're functioning in different bodies and different vehicles, we all come from the exact same source and we go back into that exact same source. So that concept is Atman, which is sometimes translated as a soul, the soul or consciousness, and I'll use those terms interchangeably throughout the lecture. That consciousness is what's inside of every single one of us and the nature of what we truly are. And when we go into the meditation later, you'll hopefully get a firsthand experience of what I mean by this. If any of you guys are familiar with meditation and yoga at all, you might have already experienced something like this where you actually notice the part of you which is observing your body, which is observing your mind. And that's what we consider to be who we truly are. This identity that we've created, this, costume we've put on is just our body, but it's not who we really are. We are that stuff which is infinite, which never dies, and which just becomes new forms of life in every birth, which is part of the theory of reincarnation. And I really just wanted to share in this photo how it says that the sages, or which were like the philosophers, the yogis of the Hindu tradition that have existed for thousands and thousands of years, when in deep states of meditation, what they realized was that when we seek the ultimate external reality, we try to find out what is this life, where are we in all of this, that is Brahman. What they consider that concept is Brahman. But when we seek the ultimate reality inward, when we're actually looking for the answers inside, that reality is Atman. And so I really liked that way that it was explained as well. That's that same concept. And now, after touching on who we are, what is the purpose of life? What is the goal of human life according to Hinduism? So there are 4 different pillars of life which we experience, and these are Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And Dharma is one of the higher concepts, as well as Moksha, but where we usually start off with, right, in our evolution as human beings, is with those more materialistic or fundamental survival needs. And this falls under the category of Kama. So Kama is like desires, sensual pleasures, feeling safe, feeling secure, having our basic needs met. But once we have that established, we can actually move into a higher state of consciousness, which is Artha, which is like, you can think of it as abundance, money, material wealth. It allows us to be free to use our time, life, and energy as we want. So that's one pillar of life as well. But once those are achieved, what's beyond that? And this is where it gets really cool, in my opinion, is that these concepts of Dharma and Moksha. So Dharma is the idea that we all have a very unique purpose on this earth. We are supposed to be, finding what that is for ourselves, and it's not going to be the same for each one of us. We're supposed to live out that duty, that purpose, and that's what it means to find your Dharma. It's about finding your place in this giant puzzle of life. And then beyond that, even, there's a higher concept, which is moksha, which can also be translated to enlightenment or liberation, self-realization. So when we have exhausted all of those goals, we've already achieved everything we want in the material world. We already have all of our basic needs met, and we've already felt like we found our purpose, we're living it. Beyond that is when we really enter that transcendental consciousness, that spiritual realm of seeking something more beyond, seeking to find that oneness with the divine, whatever we consider as that. And I just loved this quote, wanted to share with you guys, by Swami Vivekananda, who's a very famous very famous guru who came to the West and brought yoga to the West from India, that this is the secret of spiritual life. To think that I am the Atman and not the body, that I am the whole of this universe and all its relations with all its good and all its evil, but it's but a series of paintings, a scene on the canvas, which I am the witness. So what happens when we die? I'm going to share with you guys a video clip on here that explains it really beautifully. And now to touch a little bit on reincarnation. So the cycle of birth and death it's actually a fundamental part of almost every ancient culture and religion on earth. This is something which really opened my mind personally. I'll just share like a little anecdote. When I was younger, my brother told me about reincarnation actually for the first time, and it was really unsettling to me for the person that I was at that time. I had really believed strongly in the Christian beliefs of like heaven and hell, and that was like the final thing, right? So when he was explaining this to me, it really like shook my reality, and it made me have a lot of fear, and I was really resistant to it. But the more that when I started to come into opening my mind and just questioning why it is what I believe, and what do I really believe, and looking into all different spiritual paths and religions, I started to see and learn something really interesting, that even within Christianity and Catholicism, reincarnation was actually accepted. Only within the modern church in the last few thousand years, and especially in the last like 1,000 of years, they began to change church philosophy. And I won't go into the motives or the reasons why that happened, but interestingly, even within the Catholic Church and the Christian Church, reincarnation was a part of the spiritual belief until more recently, when it got adapted and changed. So that allowed me to see that, wow, this is a commonality between many, many, many different ancient and indigenous cultures. Why? Why is that? These cultures that we think haven't even had communication or contact are all saying the same thing. And so that really opened my mind to this understanding. And again, back to kind of the scientific perspective on this as well, this idea that energy cannot be created or destroyed really resonated with me. That whatever that is inside of us, which has this capacity to drive this body and this mind, it can't disappear. It can't go anywhere, because it's an energy that we still don't even understand, right? Like our own, human understanding of the mind is so limited. We don't even use even close to 50% of our brain's capacity, and that's just talking about the physical body, right? So it goes so much deeper than that. And I know that you guys already got to start looking at past lives through Dr. Ian Stevenson's work, which is really cool. I just wanted to give one more example of the Dalai Lama. So I don't know if you guys have heard this story yet, but when in Tibetan Buddhism and in the spiritual path of the Dalai Lama, how they decide the next Dalai Lama is actually really closely tied to the reincarnation beliefs. So what happens when a Dalai Lama dies, right? They're the spiritual leader of the people. They leave the body, and what happens is this team of kind of priests and scholars and spiritual figureheads within the path, they get together and they start to look for signs of where that soul, the Dalai Lama soul, is going to take its new birth. And it doesn't always happen right away after the last Dalai Lama leaves the body, but they start to look for indications. And there's a whole complex system that they use. But what I wanted to share is that what they do when they start to think that they have found the location of the Dalai Lama, and they're usually really young children, right? So think about like a 4 or 5 year old kid. All of a sudden they have these reasonings why they believe a certain child is the next incarnation of this soul. So what they do is they start to vet all of these different cases, all of these different children in Tibet and in China. And what they do is they go around to all these different possible incarnations, possible, options, and they do a really interesting test. So they bring a bag of hundreds of different objects, and they're all super unique and very random. Say, like a string of pearls or a wooden doll or a hairbrush or a comb. So there's just all of these different objects and toys that they bring with them. And they put the kids through a series of really, really complex tests where they see what objects that child will gravitate towards, and they'll also see what is triggered in that child with the object. And they're looking for like very specific evidences that when the last Dalai Lama left the body, he would say, look for me in the next body. I'm going to pick up the hairbrush and I'm going to tell you a story about it, how my mother used to brush my hair with this brush, and I remember that from my past life. And I'll tell you that story. That's how you'll know I'm the next Dalai Lama. And so this is how, for thousands of years, they have been following the progress of the Dalai Lama's soul and choosing the next Dalai Lama. It's very fascinating. There's lots of videos about it if you guys want to check out more about that. And just to touch a little bit about karma and how it relates. So like the video was sharing, karma is very much essentially tied into reincarnation theory. Now, like, I know that the saying goes, everybody loves to throw it around in the US and the Western world, like karma's a bitch. That couldn't be further from the truth. Karma is simply a cosmic law of life, okay? It's not a system of punishment or of like, oh, if you kick somebody, you're gonna get kicked back. It's a philosophy that guides the cycles of life, and that, yes, indeed does say whatever we give out often will come back to us, but that's because of our own consciousness, our own accord. It's nothing outside of ourselves. It's the way that our own souls evolve. It's the patterns that we decide to stay stuck in until we decide not to be stuck anymore. What I mean by that is, for example, say in this life, I have a really hard time standing up for myself, okay? I always let people walk on me, and I have a hard time voicing when I need to speak up. In the next life, I might have to reenact that exact same pattern until I decide to break that cycle, until I decide to act differently. In this way, this is how karma functions. And there are 3 essential types of karma which determine what we experience in our next life as we go through the cycle of reincarnation. And that is agamya karma, which is basically the new karma that we create every life. So that's all the patterns that we pick up, that you're picking up right now, right? You might have, had an incompletion with your parents when you were little because they told you needed to lose weight when you were in your chubby stage, or you got bullied as a kid and that belief entered you that you're not worthy enough of love. Like this, we pick up these new issues that we have to work through in every lifetime. Now, prarabdha karma is our pre-existing desires that we actually came here to fulfill. So you can think of that as like what your mission was when you took this current birth. So when you entered your mom's belly and you came out as the new beautiful being that you are, you have a set goal, a mission that your soul already knew, and the reason why it took birth, where it took birth, in the family that it took birth with, in the body that you have right now, in the gender that you identify with, in the ethnicity that you have. It's all purposeful. It's all purposeful. None of it was an accident. It was your soul's choice to enter in this, to live out exactly what you needed to evolve. And lastly, we have sanchita karma, which is, you can think about like a bank vault or a safety deposit box of all the karma you've had from all the past lives you've ever led. So it's like the stash of all the patterns and memories your soul carries along on its journey. And the beautiful part is that in this cycle of reincarnation, there is no going backwards. So there's no such thing as devolving. No matter what we choose for, whether it's the right or the wrong choice, none of that actually exists. It's only gonna be how fast are we accelerating, or maybe we're gonna put the brakes on just a bit, but we can never actually fully stop that car from moving forward. And that's why in the Hindu philosophy, how we view reincarnation is like, usually generally speaking, your life will move from less sentience to more sentience. So you will start as, say, like a rock or a mineral, And then your soul might have moved into a plant or a tree. And then your soul might have moved into a type of animal body. Maybe then next it will move to a more sentient animal like a dog or a cow. And then it'll move to an ape. And then eventually it will enter into a human form. And the human body is considered the ultimate gift in the cycle of reincarnation, because it is the one body which can hold the highest consciousness, which has the capacity to have self-awareness and self-realization, which no other body has on earth. And that's why in the human body, we have to treat our body as a temple. That's why yoga, meditation, and tantra all share about the very, very important concept of honoring your body as a temple, because it's considered a temporary gift to lead you to enlightenment and self-realization, to realize the truth of who you really are. And this is why yogis and sages and enlightened masters within Hinduism have emphasized time and time again the extreme importance of facing death before we die. Because if we carry a fear of death with us, it means that we are identifying ourselves with our body and with our mind. We're limiting the possibility and truth of who we really are as pure infinite consciousness, as the soul which never dies. And the more that we relate and over-identify with our body-mind, we create and cause ourselves so much suffering, because we're identifying with something that's temporary and not real and is not going to come with us. And so that's why this path, emphasizes so much about bringing that internal awareness into that undying nature inside, that we can truly experience peace, bliss, and enlightenment when we face death. Because the truth is that there's the part of us which never dies. It's never going to go anywhere. So when we allow these false identities to shed, to go through the death process, we're actually freeing ourselves from an illusion that causes only suffering in our lives. And like I kind of shared at the very beginning, Hindu culture embraces a very close relationship with death. It's not something to be scared of, to shun, to not speak about. It's something to really embrace and be celebrated, because all it means is that we have lived out everything we could have possibly lived out in this body when we leave it. So it's never considered an accident when somebody dies. It's always considered very auspicious or a blessing. And whether we fully grasp that or not is a different story. Of course, we all go through our own emotions with death, but it's about understanding that karma of that person has gotten fully lived out, fully realized in that form, and now they're just going to enter into the next stage of their evolution, into the next possibility for their life to expand and expand and expand. And so now we're going to do a little meditation. So if you guys can just sit in a comfortable position with me, we're going to enter into the meditation, okay? So just keep your head, neck, and spine in a straight line. Just close your eyes. And just come to your breath. Let's take a few deep breaths, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. Inhaling and exhaling. And as we start to settle into the body, just want you to bring awareness to your thoughts. Throughout the meditation, you're definitely going to have thoughts arise and fall away. And that's nothing to worry about. Just allow them as they come up. Just allow them to release. Just don't get too stuck on any thought which comes up. Think of yourself just sitting on the bank of a river. And down that river is flowing each thought, each emotion that might arise, each distraction, each feeling that might come up for you, and just allow it to float down. You'll see it for a second and then it's going to be gone. And as we sit and start to bring awareness into our own minds, I want you to bring your presence, your awareness, to the palms of your hands. If you can rest them comfortably on your knees, that's best. And just start to notice the sensation of your palms. Really bring that feeling of awareness into both of your hands. You might start to notice some sensations, warmth, tingling, some kind of energy. And as you sit with that feeling, that energy, I want you to expand that awareness, expand that presence into your arms. You can feel your presence as like a cloud, a bubble, a field around both of your arms. Just pay attention to whatever feelings might arise as you bring this awareness. As we slowly expand that awareness into the heart center, the chest, infusing that presence into the belly and the spine, how it might feel to be sitting here. As we move that awareness up through the neck and into the head, noticing the sensations that we're feeling. And as you're sitting here, expand this awareness now from the top of the head all the way down through the legs. As we start to feel our presence expand around our whole body, down to the tips of the toes and the bottom of the feet. Noticing the sensation we might feel between our feet and the ground. A pulsation of energy. And now I invite you to move your awareness into the room in which you're sitting. You've expanded it thus far throughout the body, and now push that field out into the room as you feel the presence of all the space around you. Notice what you might be visualizing or seeing as your eyes are closed. You might be able to watch your own body in this meditation. Or maybe you're just feeling the expanded space of your presence, the energy buzzing through your body. As we do one last expansion of our energy Visualize your energy flowing through your feet out and onto the entire earth, the ground from which you're touching. And bringing your awareness up through the head, allowing it to expand out of this room into the entire sky. Zooming out of our small identity, witnessing all of the life on this planet. Sitting in this space of restful awareness. Remembering the one who is doing the observing is the part of you which is deathless. The part of you which is capable of even watching your thought as it comes and goes, of feeling sensations in your body and outside of it. You are that. You are that observer. Remembering to connect to the nature of your being, which is this presence. And just keep your eyes closed and bring a space of listening as I share with you the last part of this meditation.
Death can be a great door to experience life existentially. Most of the beings experience life only during death. It is unfortunate they are afraid of their own life's peak existence. It is paradoxical. Beings which are supposed to be excited about life are afraid of the life which expresses itself intensely during death. Death is only for the things which can die in you. But you are deathless. If you are worried about death, you always associate yourself with objects which can die. Objects which can die is not you, neither part of you, nor existential you. It is just added to you.
As we're going to open up for the Q&A here.
I have a question about what you said about like how the spirit kind of picks the body intentionally. Does Hinduism have like opinions on how transgender communities, like they change genders, and the fact that the soul would have to like pick the gender they went into?
Yes, that's such a great question. I love that topic. So it's actually very progressive, even though it's arguably like one of the most ancient spiritual paths in the world. Transgender and actually a spectrum of 11 different genders is acknowledged within Hinduism. So it was never a binary concept within the spiritual path. It's only in modern times has culture, not only in the West, but also in the East, been influenced by this concept of the duality of gender. Before that, in almost all indigenous cultures, it didn't exist. Transgender was considered a very sacred gender, actually, within Hinduism. Still today, there are rituals which only transgender people can do within the temples, because they're considered to be more in touch with both the feminine and masculine energies in the body, which is kind of considered to be like a more enlightened soul. So it's really cool how that's viewed. And basically it's this large spectrum where the flow was always allowed to be there. So it's like the soul decides to take certain identifications, but it was never forced, like it was never considered to be like, oh, it was accidental that I took a female body, but I relate more as a man. It was that full expression was never wrong to begin with. You never had to relate as a woman. Only in our more modern culture there was this paradigm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd just like to say first off, thank you so much. These are things and topics that have interested me for a very long time. My mom is a very, very spiritual person, so she turned me on to a lot of this.
Cool.
I, like you, grew up Catholic, and I've kind of transitioned more into this side of things. Buddhism and Hinduism specifically are the things that interest me. But I still kept, I still believe a lot of the good teachings of Catholicism, and I'm kind of just, I'm young, I'm figuring out how to merge those two within myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my question is, I follow a lot of spiritual people, I've read the works of Ram Dass and then some of those 60s figures. And a lot of those guys, like Terence McKenna, believe that there was a sort of integration between psychedelics and these sort of religions. And as someone who practices it, I would like to ask you, what is your belief on the integration of psychedelics? Is that something that's accepted or kind of shunned away from when we talk about those sort of things?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's actually really not a one-size-fits-all answer. There are definitely different gurus that have talked about them and integrated them into the path, but it's definitely more of a modernized and westernized concept, I would say. That's not to say it's like right or wrong, more that it was definitely part of that wave, like you mentioned, in the 60s and 70s, with that movement that kind of started integrating psychedelics and their usage. That being said, there was definitely some usage of substances within like the path of Hinduism, including most commonly what was used was actually cannabis. And cannabis was used by a lot of different yogis, and still today is, especially followers of Shiva, which I'm actually part of that path. But it doesn't actually necessarily map out the way we might understand. So my guru actually explained it really beautifully, and it made a lot of sense to me, so I'll just share that. What he said is the reason that these sages and yogis, these are guys who, are the wandering monks of the Himalayas, right? If you guys have ever seen them, sometimes called as sadhus, they are fully devoted, right? They have no life other than their spiritual path. And most of them are in really high states of consciousness, what we call samadhi states. So they're almost like entirely out of their body most of the time. You'll even when you see them. And I've had direct experiences with some of them, and it was really, really like mind-blowing. I actually met one sadhu who for 30 years stood on one foot only and never set his foot down, and his leg was completely collapsed and shriveled because of disuse, just as a spiritual practice to reach enlightenment. And I got to see him physically at this giant spiritual festival of Hinduism called Kumbh Mela, which happens every 12 years. But these guys, sometimes you'll see them smoking. And the reason for this is actually because they're in such transcended states of consciousness, they actually use marijuana as a tool to ground themselves in their body. So interestingly, my guru said, you guys are trying to get up and not down. So you should understand that if you're using those at the place most of us are at, we are actually keeping ourselves stuck at a certain level versus completely leaving. There might be a point where we might reach that state and use it as a grounding tool, but I really resonated with that explanation. But there are a lot of different diverse beliefs on that. So I don't want to just say like that's the one answer. But yeah, there's lots of different variation within the different traditions.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm in the 200-hour yoga teacher training right now, and so we've been talking about this. So thank you so much.
That's awesome.
So to get more insight. But in that training that you mentioned how like karma affects your dharma, and I guess that concept kind of confuses me a bit, because like, does it change your life's path, or like different lessons, or is it just a different means to get there?
Yes, that's a great point. Basically, you can think about it like, I know we went so fast through so many different things, but the prarabdha karma is the one part of karma which is considered like what you bring with you to fulfill in this life. So I would say that's the intersection with dharma, because it's like you came to fulfill that, which is exactly what your dharma kind of interrelates with. So they kind of go together hand in hand, because it's almost like, you know, you might have had something since a child that you felt called to do. Not everybody, right? But sometimes we are awakened at a really young age to what we're called to do. For example, when I was a kid, although being raised in Orange County in a Catholic house, not at all connected to any type of things like this, I used to go under my stairs, and there was like this little wine cellar, like kind of cave thing, and I would put like blankets down, and I would sit in Padmasana in like lotus position, and I would chant Om. And my parents had no idea why I did that and why I started doing that. And there's all these little things that throughout my life I would tell. Even in like first and second grade, I told my dad that I was gonna live in India, and he would say like, "Why do you say that?" And I said, "I just know, like I'm supposed to be there." I tried to get my nose pierced at like 10 years old, even though that was super banned at my Catholic school, because I just like was so drawn to it, and I had no idea of the interconnections to any of this. And that's just like some small examples. But like this, we have these awakenings to like callings that we have, right? Whether it be, you know, I've always felt to be like I was going to be a healer, and I ended up being on this Ayurvedic path of holistic medicine. Or you might, you know, have felt always like drawn to yoga in these unique ways, and now only you're fulfilling that, right? So there's so many different things, even the intellectual paths that we take, the family paths that we might take, where we might live, all of those things kind of can intersect with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
We've been talking a lot in the past few classes about like ghosts, and especially like the spiritualist movement, and how like people have had sightings and their seances. So is ghosts like a thing in Hinduism, and how is it like explained?
Oh, this is like the best class. I love this class. You guys are so cool. So I wish we could do that. Like, I wish this was normal in like every part of school. Then I would have actually really loved school a lot more. So I'm sure you guys all feel that way. Yeah, so it's really multifold. Definitely the concept of ghosts are there within Hinduism, but it's a very interesting take on it. So multifold. First, the only way in which a soul would actually become a ghost, as per Hindu philosophy, is actually when they leave the body unnaturally. So if an accident happens earlier than that soul was actually supposed to leave, so say like somebody was in a car accident at a young age, but they were actually supposed to live till 60 naturally, those years which they were naturally supposed to live out, they might be in the body, like in the in-between, which is like a limbo, where they can take the form as a ghost. Similarly, if somebody commits suicide, the same thing will happen, because their life was cut short in this body. So that's the way that Hinduism acknowledges that somebody can be almost like in this in between. I forget the Sanskrit word for it. But on the other hand, people obviously have experiences, right, with like people on the other side who might not have died in either of those ways. How do we explain this? How it's kind of understood is that our connection to a soul allows that soul to live through our experience. So even though, for example, my grandpa, he left the body when I was 9 years old, and as per the theory of reincarnation, he would have already took a new body 13 days later after he died. So he's like right away, he's in a new body. So how would I be connecting with his soul, right? How would I be connecting with his spirit if he's already in a new body? The identity, that form of him, which actually lived as my papa, my grandpa, that personality that I knew, actually can have an independent existence to his consciousness in a new body. So it gets really complex, but basically my connection to him, my attachment to him, my love for him can allow me to have a streamlined connection to his soul, even while he's in another place, and might not even be aware of it. His current, like say he's a little baby, right? And he's in a new body. That baby is not going to be aware of me as being his granddaughter, but there's actually a part of his consciousness which is the all awareness, which is that higher self, if you want to call it that, which can still interact with the past souls, which is it has encountered. So that's kind of like how the concept of ghosts are understood. And the last thing I'll add is that the really empowering thing I found, because when I was getting into my spirituality more, I entered a phase where I was actually like very fearful all the time. And I think a lot of times people face this when they're opening up to all these kind of energies and things, because it can get really overwhelming, the kind of like the negative or scary side of the spiritual world or energy and all that. So I was in that place at one point where I was really fearful. A lot of that came from the Catholic programming that I had about demons and like getting possessed and all this crazy stuff. But once I learned all this, it really empowered me. So the belief is also, though, that because we're in a physical body, we have these 7 layers, which we actually call the 7 koshas in yoga. You'll be learning about that in your yoga training, Carmen. But there's these different layers to us, right? We have all these functionalities within us: mind, body, spirit, this physical form. But ghosts, or basically disembodied spirits, you could say, don't have a physical body. And so the belief is that actually they're not able to physically harm or hurt you. They can scare you, you know, they can scare you, they can startle you psychologically or maybe just spiritually, but they cannot physically hurt you. The only way that something like that could do that to you is with your permission. So that's what I found to be really empowering, is that even the acknowledgement of that doesn't have to be a scary thing, because we have the power. Like as in a human body, we absolutely have the power to say no and close those things off if there's something which we are not desiring, or to be open to it if it's something which we are desiring. And that's a wrap.